you were supportive of Jordan Peterson's position on pronouns, I believe, and there was some things about, particularly after George Floyd's death, um, you were quite shocked at some of the things that began circulating in the company.
There are multiple things here. So
Yeah.
diversity, mentioning of Jordan Peterson, and then racial ideologies getting into overdrive after George Floyd's death. With Jordan Peterson, it was pretty simple. So I will start with that. In one of the conversations, someone posted a comment, "If only I knew why people act the way they do." And that could have been just a sarcastic remark. But I thought that maybe that person wants to understand behavior and whatever. And at that point, I was listening to Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning lectures that are not ideological. It's just basically his attempt to interpret culture and to distill some ground rules from that to make it easier for others to understand what the society thinks is good or not and whatever. I was aware of the controversy around Jordan Peterson because of Bill C-16 in Canada and the whole his transphobe position. So I decided to point that person to lectures by Jordan Peterson in case the behavior was what the person was interested in. It could have been some other lectures, like later I checked lectures by Robert Sapolsky from Stanford, and they were also great and interesting in that regard. But at that point, I wasn't that knowledgeable, and I was only pointing to Jordan Peterson. And I was already aware of this thing called trigger warnings. So I decided to do my best to provide one. And so in addition to pointing to those lectures, I've mentioned the controversy around Jordan Peterson. And I added my comment that I didn't think that controversy was a correct representation of Jordan Peterson's position. And it was basically my position. I wasn't even talking about that controversy that much. I just mentioned it to avoid traumatizing people. And I mentioned it that I didn't totally agree with the representation of that controversy. That was it. There was no argument. And I was later told by my manager and the HR that I got reported for promoting Jordan Peterson's stance on transgender pronouns, which was not even a correct representation of my comment, but it was enough to get reported to HR. Then you asked me about diversity. And James Damore, in his document, I believe, mentioned one internal document at Google called Diversity Mythbusters. And it's kind of like frequently asked questions regarding diversity document. And it attempts to debunk some, it takes some things that make people uneasy regarding diversity and tries to explain how these things are fine. And one of the parts there was about hiring specific minorities, focusing on groups. And that document basically uses what it's called coffee bean theory. And you're presented with a setup where there are two types of coffee beans in the world, and the best blend of coffee requires both of them. But one type of these beans is very rare. So it makes sense, if you want to have that best blend, to invest more into discovering these rare beans than in getting regular beans. And my understanding of that description was basically, if you take the majority, which is basically white heterosexual men at Google, and any minority, it was a claim that it was justified to invest resources into hiring people from minorities, investing more resources there. And that document was even describing things like taking steps after interviews, because you start with conversations with an HR, and then you go through an interview process with, if you are trying to become an engineer, you go through at least 5 interviews, 6 interviews with engineers, maybe even more. And after these people make their decisions, so they submit their feedbacks, and then some hiring committee makes a decision considering all the feedbacks. So the company was claiming that there were necessary steps to be taken somewhere in between to avoid minorities rejected as false negatives, meaning if someone is good enough to be a valuable employee, but for whatever reason fails to demonstrate it in these sessions because whatever, bad physical state, bad mood, something distracting interviewers, whatever it might be, whatever is it. And the company is trying to err on the safe side. The company is trying not to hire people that might be good employees, but the company doesn't have enough evidence of that. So you might be good, but you might get rejected. So that document was claiming that it was useful to invest resources into preventing this from happening for minorities.
I see, right.
Which basically means that processes, that the company acknowledges that processes are not perfect, but it is not trying to fix these processes for everyone, but only for minorities by investing additional resources there. And if it is the case, then it might be hard for a woman, let's say, to get into tech. That's what we hear again and again, that women in tech are underrepresented because of some cultural norms and whatever. But and that might be true. But as soon as you get into tech, as soon as you have skills, with this approach from the company, it looks like for an average woman, it's easier to get into Google than for an average man in the same tech field. And if the company would just state that clearly, yes, this is what we are doing, and explain why, I would have probably be fine. People can do whatever they want, and even if I disagree with them, if the company believes that this is a good course of action for the company, just say that. But the company is trying to avoid that while trying to have such hiring pipelines. And there were other examples, like at some point, one high-ranking executive somewhere on top of our project was celebrating the start of a new hiring pipeline from one specific university in the US. And we were told that this hiring pipeline is going to produce this percentage of each population. And I even wrote to that executive a question: who can I talk to about this pipeline? Because I was curious, is it already a result of using that pipeline, or is it some kind of prediction? And that executive was kind enough to respond. Some of them are great at that, despite probably getting bombarded by a lot of stuff. And I was told that it was a projection, and I was advised to talk to actually recruiters working on that program. I went to them, I started asking questions, and I immediately got shut down. Oh, you are not talking to us with good faith. And my question was, how do you know like racial profile of like a percentage of different minorities, different demographics in this in the result of that pipeline, if you've never ran it, and if you design it in such a way to enforce these percentages, then isn't it discrimination and bias?
Yeah, does it?
Because
does it not go against their policies essentially?
Because the company is talking a lot about biases that might prevent people feel welcome, or the company being inclusive. But but it's not clear what is the goal of these diversity policies. I've been trying to figure that out for some time, and I've never seen a specific answer. Like, we are trying to get 50% men, 50% women, let's say. But it looks like that's what they do because the representation, I believe, of women at Google higher than the representation in tech, or at least they were claiming at some point that it was an achievement already, but they were still pushing in that direction. And then the question is, if you sample from tech, from population that is in tech, and the resulting sample is not representative of the population in tech, as in statistics, it's literally called a biased, I believe, selections, biased sampling. Yeah. If you're trying to get to 50% men, 50% women, when in tech you have whatever 60%, 65% men, 35% women, maybe, then it's by definition, at least some definition, you are making some biased selection. And at the same time, you are telling us that biases are bad and should be avoided. And we are getting encouraged to take an unconscious bias training and such.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.